Please welcome Andy Cahan.
Look at that, huh? Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it.
So you've created, I'm curious, like, what inspired you? I mean, you've had this remarkable life. You've met and worked with all these different musicians. When did you decide, I really want to put this down? Like, you know, it's an incredible endeavor to say, all right, I mean, I'll put this down in a book. Like, what was that moment where you said, I want to document this?
I want to be a musician. Or I wanted
Writing
to
the book, you know, looking
write
back,
the book.
reflecting and saying,
Yeah.
okay, I want to capture this life that I've had.
Yeah, well, I'm a pack rat. I saved everything in my life. I saved every calendar, every postcard, letter, contract, photograph, album, tape, everything. I saved it all. And one day I was just looking through my stuff and I said, oh my God, I did that. Oh my God, I did that. And I was amazed at all the stuff I was doing. And so I, spent 4 years scanning all these photos and pictures and stuff. And I wrote the book using my cell phone. I didn't type anything. I just spoke, like every picture tells a story, so I just spoke what the pictures reminded me of. And then I sent that to my editor, Jeff Tamarkin, who did a book about the Jefferson Airplane and a book about Howard Kalin, the lead singer of the Turtles. And I actually, in 2013, was on this stage with Howard Kalin. We did a promotion for his book called Shell Shocked. So I built the book, and it really came out beautiful, and I'm very proud of it. And it's self-published on Amazon, which makes it a little bit expensive, which is a bummer. But it's been doing very well, and the reviews are really excellent. So I'm very happy about it, and I'm very grateful to be here at the Grammy Museum.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. And we've got the book tonight, so if people want to buy it, they can.
Yes.
We'll sign it afterwards, right?
I'll be more than happy to autograph your books for you, and they're for sale at the bookstore and however you make it available.
I'm curious, like, when you put the book together, and you worked on this for 4 years, but as you sort of reflected and looked back, like, what struck you in retrospect?
The amazing photographs, the history with Little Richard and Chuck Berry. I was the music director in 1974 for the Grammys. I worked with Little Richard for about a year and a half, and we went to Australia, and we did a whole United States Let the Good Times Roll, Richard Nader, and we did a whole tour like that. And here I was at the Grammy being the music director for Little Richard and Chuck Berry, and the rehearsal was just me on an upright piano in this little back room, and Little Richard was there, and Chuck had his guitar, and we went over all their hit records. And the whole purpose of the giving away the awards was, instead of Tutti Frutti Ah Rudy, it was Al Green, He's Clean, stuff like that. So they changed all the lyrics to all the songs to do the performance. But during the performance, Little Richard's mic went out, so there was no sound. And then later on, Chuck Berry's mic went out, so there was no sound. So this is all live. And then, of course, I had to give the band cues, for the intros and outros. And so the grand piano is right in the center stage, and the drummer was behind me up in the back there. The guitar player was over there. Everybody was scattered all over the stage, so there was no eye contact. So we had to wing it. And I was going to show the video tonight, but we couldn't get it together. But the video's pretty good. But just working with Little Richard and Chuck Berry, these guys are the idols of Paul McCartney and John Lennon. So it was full circle, because the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, they were the reason that I became a musician. I was making monster movies like Frankenstein and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman and all these monster movies. And then the Beatles came out on Ed Sullivan, and I said to myself, I want to be a Beatle. I'm not going to pick up any girls making monster movies. So that's how that came together. But that was a huge highlight. Just to work with Little Richard and Chuck Berry is just amazing.
So how did you first meet with Little Richard?
A phone call the night before. The drummer from the Turtles, Craig Cramph, he called me up and he said, Bumps Blackwell just called him. Now, Bumps Blackwell was the co-writer of Tutti Frutti and Good Golly Miss Molly and a lot of Little Richard's hits. And he was like Little Richard's manager. So he called up Craig and he says, we need an organ player. So the night before, Craig calls me and he says, we're going to LAX tomorrow and we're doing a concert tour with Little Richard. And no rehearsal. I mean, you have to know all these hit records, which is pretty easy, 3-chord stuff. And so no rehearsal. We played in Hershey, Pennsylvania at this huge stadium, like 50,000 people or whatever. And no rehearsal. We got up on stage, and Little Richard comes out, and he just ripped it up. It was like the most amazing thing I've ever experienced in my life. He was like all over the place. He started out on the grand piano, then he got off the piano and he jumped around. He jumped on top of the piano, and then he jumped around, and then he jumped on top of the organ. I'm sitting here playing the organ, looking up at him as he's dripping sweat all over me, It was really exciting. So we did a whole concert tour, and then we went to Australia, and it was really totally amazing, really fun.
So that's the first night. Like over time, would he ever rehearse with you guys, or was like no need to
No rehearse.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a rock musician and you don't know Tutti Frutti and Good Golly Miss Molly and Rip It Up and Send Me Some Love and all of his hits, and they're all 3-chord stuff, so it's pretty easy. And it's all the same kind of pounding.
But I'm just thinking of like a James Brown who was, serious rehearsals.
Oh, I'm sure.
Chuck Berry, same thing you're talking about.
Oh, Chuck Berry, it was really funny with Chuck. At the little rehearsal, I say, what key is this song in? He says, I don't know. It's like this. It's over here. Okay? All right. What key is that? Oh, B flat. Okay, sure. So, like, he didn't even know what key he was in. It just looked like that on his guitar. So that was really funny.
And how about the relationship between those two, Little Richard and Chuck Berry? Were they friendly? Were they not friendly?
Little Richard would always put him down. He would claim that he was the king of rock and roll. But they're two different animals. I mean, their styles are so completely different. But they're both amazing, and they got along. They've done a lot of shows together, but it was really funny. But the bummer was when the mics went out, so that was kind of a bummer.
Terrible, yeah.
Yeah.
Can we drop back? You mentioned some of your early inspirations, and I'm just curious. Like, you grew up in a musical family, and I want to talk a little bit about the Catskills, because that seemed like introducing you to different bands. I think of Bill Graham, who of course spent a lot of time in the Catskills, and really a lot of what he did as a music promoter, he learned in the Catskills. So I'm wondering for you, like, what role the Catskills played in terms of your musical formation.
You mean the Catskills, the location?
No, but going to clubs, seeing bands,
Oh, yeah.
performances.
Yeah, back in New Rochelle, New York, around 1964, 65, I used to be a free roadie for the Young Rascals. Felix Cavalieri lived right down the block from me. I lived in New Rochelle on Webster Avenue, and he lived down Eastchester Road in Yonkers. And I used to ride my bicycle down there and bring him some of the songs I wrote and stuff.
But you were how old at that point?
I was 17, 18, something like that. Yeah. And he was my idol, the Hammond B3 organ. It was the biggest thing in the world to me. And we used to go to this place in Larchmont, or in Westchester County somewhere, and he turned me on to the Hammond B3, and that's. But I used the Farfisa Combo Compact. It's the same organ they used for 96 Tears and Come On Down to My Boat Baby and Wooly Bully and all the cheesy organ songs. And I used to run that through a Hammond Leslie speaker. And I used to play left-hand bass, and I ran the bass through a bass amp. So it was pretty advanced for 1965. And it was really amazing, amazing era. And, you know, Felix was definitely my mentor for organ.
So you graduated from high school, and did you have a plan, or did you just think, okay, I want to be in the music industry, and I'm going to make this happen no matter what? What were you thinking at that point?
Well, in high school, because of Ed Sullivan, during lunchtime and everything, I met my lead singer, Reno, and my drummer, Sandy, and my guitar player all at lunchtime. And then we used to go back to my house every day after school and rehearse every day, 7 days a week, until we built up a really good repertoire. We did a lot of my originals and cover tunes at that time. And we won all of the Battle of the Bands. We won them all. We were really tight. My mom made our uniforms. She sewed our jackets. You know, the Beatles had, you know, the Nehru jackets, and so my mom made us Nehru jackets, and we had our Beatle boots, and we played Beatles songs. I mean, you know, all that stuff, all the great stuff, Animals, Beatles, Beau Brummels, Kinks, Zombies, you know, all that stuff. And so our lead singer was kind of crazy, and he used to steal stuff, like cars, and you know, he used to do that. So I had my movie camera in my living room that I made all my monster movies with, and I was upstairs with my girlfriend, and he just walked into my living room, and he took the movie camera, and he decided to sell it. So he sold my movie camera, and that really kind of got me angry, and so in revenge, I called up his girlfriend, and I said, would you like to go to California with me? I want to go to California and try to get started in the music business in California. And she agreed, so I stole his girlfriend in revenge for stealing my movie camera. So, you know, it's a really great story because we hopped in my VW bus and we picked up 2 or 3 hippie hitchhikers. And her job, every time we stop at a gas station, she was supposed to open the glove box, pull out the money, and pay for the gas. That was her job. She forgot in Oklahoma. So I filled it up with gas, and she forgot to pay. So I drove off, and then the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, 2 of them, 2 cars, pulled us over, you know, with their white 10-gallon hats. And they arrested me and her and the 3 hippies in my VW bus. So we went to the jail, and
it's a nice way to put it.
We went to the jail, and the deputy picks up a shotgun and throws it across the room to the sheriff, and they're all giggling. We got ourselves a white Christmas, you know. And so they stand me up against the wall, and there's a whole bunch of Polaroid pictures on the wall of all these hippies that they arrested, and they had long hair and everything. And then right next to the picture of them with long hair was the picture of them with no hair. So what they did was the same thing they did to me. They said, okay, you get to talk to the judge after you cut all your hair off. So they gave me a back of a frying pan as a mirror and a pair of children's rounded off scissors. So I'm cutting all my hair in the jail cell, and of course there's a whole bunch of degenerate Oklahoma bums there. And so finally I cut all my hair off, and my, you know, the girl, my lead singer's girlfriend that I kidnapped was in another cell, and so I got her out, and the guy hands me the phone, and the judge was on the phone, and he says, how much money you got on you, boy? I go, $75. He says, pay the man. Click. And that was it. So I paid the guy $75, and my bus was in impound. So I had to walk about 2 miles to the Western Union and tell my mom to send me some money. So she sent me money, and I got my bus out of impound, and then we finished our drive to California. So that was my big experience of stealing girlfriends.
Get a good mom.
I know, I love it. Yeah, I had some really great experiences. I enjoy this next one. There was an Epic Records tour in 1975. I was working with Michael Fennelly, who used to be in a group called Krabby Appleton. Anyway, so on the bill was Flash Cadillac, King Biscuit, Sha Na Na, Michael Fennelly, and Dave Loggins, Please Come to Boston. So we're all on this Hughes aircraft at Burbank Airport, ready to fly to Spokane to do a concert. And then the pilot gets on the mic, and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, our front wheel is broken, and we're going to have to sit on the ground for a couple hours while they fix it. Free drinks for everybody. Right? This is 1975. There was no 9/11 or nothing. So the pilots opened up the front door, and all the free drinks were flowing around the airplane. Everybody was getting wasted. And King Biscuit had a big straw hat. And this was at the same time that David Niven was streaked on the award show. So King Biscuit started passing around the hat around the airplane for money for a streaker. So they had $300 in the hat. And this is 1975. That was a lot of money. And I had to make a payment on my Mercedes. So I volunteered. I said, I'll do it. So I went up to and grabbed the $300 and went back to the bathroom and took off all my clothes. Then I opened up the door and I peeked out and I said, okay. And then the whole airplane goes, yay! And I ran down the aisle naked. And then I ran back up the aisle, and I made $300. So there you go. You know, this is the kind of stuff I love. This is what you call road stories, you know. So that was really cool. I'll tell you another really funny story. We played a hippie show with Chubby Checker and Felix Cavalieri. And we were all supposed to dress like hippies and do this concert at this place in Vegas. So the show went off really great. It was a really great show. And you know, I spoke to Chubby Checker backstage, and he was really nice and stuff. So the next morning at the lobby, we're all paying for our rooms or, you know, checking out. And Chubby Checker had his mother with him. And she was in a wheelchair. So, you know, I'm standing there in the lobby, and there's a long hallway down there. And at the end of the hallway, I see Chubby Checker wheeling his mom in a wheelchair. So, you know, I look at him, and I kind of wave at him, and he gives me this maniacal look. Like, you know, oh, yeah. And then at full speed, he takes his mom in the wheelchair and runs down the aisle directly at me. I mean, like, just going to hit me. And at the last, and she's laughing, and he's laughing, and I'm going, ah. And he just missed me. He was trying to run me over with his mom in the wheelchair. So that was another. All this kind of stuff is in the book. It's really a funny book. Well, it's really a lot of fun. But do you mind if I say another story?
Please do.
Okay, yeah. Okay. But one of the highlights of my life was meeting Harry Nilsson. I did a radio show with Flo and Eddie. They were on K-Rock after Howard Stern, and they had a thing at Universal City Studios with 40 radio stations across the country set up in tents. Each radio station had a tent with the truck, with the satellite dish, you know, and they did interviews with hundreds of celebrity musicians. Roger Daltrey and Harry Nilsson and Paul McCartney and Elvira and Eric Burden and Bobby Hatfield and Dean Torrance and all these celebrities. And my job, I had my keyboard in the tent, and I had a limousine. So my job was to pick up Bobby Hatfield or Harry Nilsson or Elvira and take them to the tent. And then we'd all do Happy Together, because Flo and Eddie were the Happy Together guys. And then we would do that artist's hit song. So Harry Nilsson was one of the guys. So I drove out to Hidden Hills, and I picked him up at his house, and I opened up the back door of the limo, and he says, I'm sitting up front with you. So there he is, the guy that the Beatles loved as their favorite singer-songwriter. And he was sitting next to me, and I'm going, holy shit, you're Harry Nilsson. You're the guy. You're the guy the Beatles love. And so we just really hit it off really good. And my girlfriend at the time smoked Virginia Slims 120 Lights, the long, skinny cigarettes. So I was hooked on these long, skinny cigs. So I go to light up a cig, and he had Camels, right? And he looks at me, and he goes, you're not going to smoke that, are you? I said, oh, why? And so he handed me the Camel, and so we're both sitting there smoking Camels. And then he proceeded to just talk Beatles. So we were stuck in traffic on the 405 for an hour and a half, and that's all he did. And we were smoking a cigarette and talking about the Beatles. And he said that Mama Cass and Keith Moon, they both stayed at his London flat, and they both died in his bed. Mama Cass and Keith Moon both died in Harry Nilsson's London flat. But that's the kind of stuff. And, he would tell me stories that he was flat broke, and they needed food. So he would wear a trench coat and go to the liquor store and put his hand in the pocket of the trench coat like this and rob the liquor store with his finger in the pocket and to get food for his mom. And this is all true stuff. And there was really one funny time, I got to tell you. He was such a character, and he was so intelligent and so funny. But we went to a car wash, and the guy says, your car's too dirty. So Harry says, put it through again, But on the way there, we were going to smoke a joint, and he says, you got a lighter? I says, no, you steal all my lighters. I don't have any lighters. So we're at the car wash, and by the cash register, there's a bowl with lighters in it, like hundreds of lighters in this bowl. So, he goes to pay the car wash, and the lady is at the cash register, and she looks down, and then he, in about half a second, whoosh, grabs a handful of lighters and puts them in his pocket. And then after we left the car wash, he takes the lighters out of his pocket and throws them at me. He says, here's your fucking lighter. So it was really, Harry was the best. We'd be smoking a joint in my living room. I recorded 35 songs with him on a 4-track cassette. And he had a Shure SM58 mic, and we recorded, all original songs and cover tunes. We smoke a joint and laugh and stuff. And one time we were smoking, and there was an ashtray right in front of him, and he started laughing, and the ashes blew up in his face, so it covered his glasses in ashes. So we were laughing our asses off, and I went like this with my finger, like a windshield wiper, on his face to get rid of the ashes. The stuff that we went through, going over to Timothy Leary's house, he would pick me up at midnight. He had 6 kids and a wife at home, and he didn't want to be home. He wanted to hang out with me like a bunch of high school buddies. So we would drive around, we'd go over Timothy Leary's house and, hang out with him and, do stuff with him. Go over to Joe Walsh's house. go over to Bill Martin's house, who wrote Harry and the Hendersons. He also wrote a hit record for the Turtles and Linda Ronstadt. Anyway, so just hanging out with Harry Nilsson was like the most amazing time in my life. And then the thing happened. It's like a premonition. I was in Hollywood in 1968 when I first moved out here, and I'm sitting at my harpsichord, and I had a premonition that a Beatle was in my house. And he was sitting next to me, and he took his shoes off. So I thought that was cool. Wow. And then in 1992, Harry Nilsson brings Ringo Starr over to my living room on Laurel Canyon, and it was 100 degrees out, so I had to turn off the air conditioner to so it wouldn't get picked up on the mic and all that. So Ringo did all this children's stories narration. And then, he sat down right next to me, and he took his shoes off. So that was that premonition that I had a Beatle in my house when he sat down next to me and took his shoes off. So that was really cool. And then after that session, we went to Ringo's house, and he had the couch there, and he was sitting on the couch. Harry was in a little lounge chair, and I was on another couch here. And there was a red and blue acoustic guitars with a Ringo Starr inlay in the fret. So I said to Ringo, "Do you mind if I play your guitar?" "Oh, no, it's okay, sure." So I picked up the guitar, and I start strumming a G chord. Ding, chang, ka-chang, ka-ding, chang, ka-chang. And then Harry goes in his baritone voice, because he lost his voice because of John Lennon doing the primal scream during the Pussycats album. Harry couldn't sing high anymore. He was baritone and tenor. So while I'm strumming the G chord, he goes, "Listen for your footsteps coming up the drive," in a low voice. And the song is in the key of C. So Ringo starts singing along in the key of C. So they're singing in fifths. So it was hilarious singing this Ringo Starr song with Harry in Ringo's living room. So it's stuff. All this stuff is in the book. It's a really great book, and it's got never seen before photographs and just really cool behind-the-scenes stories with tons of celebrities. If you look at the index of the book, it blows me away with all the name dropping. In fact, Harry and I were going to write a song together called Name Dropper, but we never got to do that.
Well, thinking of names, we've got to talk about Mark Volman and Howard Kalin.
Oh.
They play a big role in this. How did you first meet them?
I was with Jimmy Carl Black in a band called Geronimo Black in 1968. He was the Indian of the group with Frank Zappa and the Mothers. And so my friend Scooby from the Musicians Union told Jimmy that I was a really good keyboard player. And so he came over to my house with Roy Estrada, the bass player, and I had my harpsichord, and I started playing my songs. They said, "Oh, cool, cool." So we started a band, and then Frank Zappa asked Jimmy to be in the movie 200 Motels. And so I went to the rehearsal, and there was Flo and Eddie at the rehearsal. And that was the first time I met him. And we went out back to smoke a J and all that stuff. And so later on at Cherokee Studios in Box Canyon, off of Topanga Canyon, it was a 4-track studio. It was the same studio that Ricky Don't Lose That Number and all that. So I was hired to do some organ overdubs for Richard Nader's Let the Good Times Roll movie. And so Flo and Eddie were there doing a soundtrack for a movie called Cheap. It was also called Dirty Duck, and it was an X-rated cartoon. And so we're in the studio and stuff, and Bruce Robb was the engineer. There was a group called the Robs that used to be the house band on Where the Action Is. Anyway, so they asked Bruce to go on the road with them as a keyboard guy, and he says, "I can't because I'm engineering in the studio." So they asked me. They said, would you mind? Would it be okay? And ever since that day in 1973, I was with the Turtles for 40 years. And we toured Europe as a 2.5-man show. It was like a vaudeville act. It was like they had a movie screen with slideshows from the early days when they were in a group called the Crossfires, a surf band, and then the Turtles and all that stuff. And then we would do parodies and funny skits. And I was like a half a man. I played a Fender left-hand bass keyboard and a Yamaha piano. And they had a thing called the Rhythm King drum machine, and just had buttons on it like Paso Doble, like boom, chick boom, 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 chick boom, boom, and all these different rhythms and the speed of the thing. So I had all my notes, you know, how fast the song was and the rhythm that I should use. And we did this whole show. And one of the highlights was Pink, Flo and Eddie's The Fence instead of Pink Floyd's The Wall. So what they did was they had a rattan fence, and we introduced it as Pink, Flo and Eddie's The Fence. And they bring out the fence, and you know, you get splinters on this stupid thing. So they gave me a puppet, an aardvark. So I wore this aardvark on my hand to hold the fence. And they played We Don't Need No Education, but they sped it up. So it's, we don't need no education, you know, real fast. And so we were bouncing and throwing airplanes and hippos and balloons and stuff up, and it was so hilarious. You can actually Google it, the 2.5-man show, and the videos online. But working with Flo and Eddie was, I got to meet every single guy that I grew up listening to working with Flo and Eddie. You know, like Tommy Rowe and Gary Puckett and Spanky and Our Gang and, you know, all these great groups that I grew up listening to, I got to meet. So it was very, very cool. And I'll tell you a really good story. We did a tour in Australia, and our first stop was Toowoomba, which is this out in the middle of nowhere place. And it was our very first show. We got off the airplane. We took a 3-hour drive out into the middle of nowhere, and there were 9 people, you know, setting up the stage, you know, the sound crew and the lights and all that. And so we did our sound check, and we went back to the hotel and had dinner, and then came back to the gig, and nobody showed up. We played the entire concert to the 9 people that were there, and we were scared shitless. We were in Australia, and we had like another 12, 14 dates to play all around, and we're saying to ourselves, what? There's nobody here. What's going on? But luckily, the rest of the tour was all sold out. And our next stop was Melbourne. And we got to play with Lou Reed. He opened the show for us. He was the opening act. And I got to hang out with Lou Reed. That was good. You know, there's so many people in my book that I just got to hang out with. And so that's, you know, one of the reasons it's hard to get a lot of people in the Grammy Museum because nobody knows who I am. Who's that guy? He's the most famous musician. You never heard of him. Who is he? What does he do? So that's what my book is all about, all these people that I've worked with that, you know, like Andy Warhol said, everybody's got 15 minutes of fame, right? So with me in my book, each guy that I met is 15 minutes. So I have a lot of minutes of fame in that book.
And for you, as you were, you know, moving through your career, did you have a particular approach, like I'll say yes to what comes next, like looking for opportunities, and also with your own work, you were writing original songs. How did you approach that just in terms of thinking about, all right, where do I go next? What's my next opportunity?
It's just self-promotion. My whole life has been self-promotion. You know, just making phone calls. I don't know how I survived without a cell phone or a laptop. How did I do it? I don't even remember how I did it then, back in the 60s and 70s. So technology has really made it really easy to promote yourself these days. But back then, I don't even remember how I got gigs.
Was it word of mouth? Like people
Word
knew
of
about it?
mouth,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then talk about when you were the demo doctor, like
Yes.
for a number of years. Like, how did that come about, and what were you doing?
I was playing 5 nights a week. Actually, I got fired from the Turtles. I was getting divorced the same week I got fired. And the reason was that I was all stressed out from getting divorced. And we had 2 keyboard players on stage with the Turtles. And the budget didn't allow for paying 2 guys. So Flo and Eddie said, Andy, you have to learn both parts, all the horn parts and string parts and the rhythms on the keyboard. You have to learn them both. So at that time, my chops were down. I wasn't up to par. So they said, we're going to have to let you go. And but I did a lot of studio work with them. I did all the Strawberry Shortcake. That's all me on the Casio. And all the G.I. Joe is all me on the Casio. And the Care Bears, that's all me on the Casio. And really was amazed. We went over to Ray Bolger's house. This is the straw man in The Wizard of Oz. And we went to his house, and he was going to sing the lead of a cartoon called Peter and the Magic Egg about Easter, about Easter Bunny. So there I am. I'm sitting in Ray Bolger's garage at the upright, and Ray Bolger is sitting right next to me. And I'm going, yikes, And he turns at me and he goes, do you want to know what it was like to be in The Wizard of Oz? I was in shock. And, he told me all these great stories like the Munchkins hated Dorothy because she was a real bitch. She wasn't nice. She was not nice to the Munchkins. In fact, everybody on the crew was not nice to the Munchkins. They got treated like shit. So what they did was they got some dog shit, and they put it in a paper bag, and they, put it there, and they walked up to Dorothy's trailer, her dressing room trailer, and they placed it on the ground in front of her door, and then they lit it on fire. Then they knocked on her door and ran away. So Dorothy would open up the door and see this burning bag in front of her, and she stamped it out. So that's the kind of stuff that the Munchkins did to get back. And this is from Ray Bolger. And, he would tell me that when they shot The Wizard of Oz, it was all live in Gower Studios. The orchestra was over there. The set was over here. The cameras, the booms, the makeup, and it was all done live. There was no overdubbing. There was no, it was all done live. It's just amazing stuff. But just to be there with Ray Bolger was really amazing.
Well, in some ways, it makes me think you're a testament to the idea of, like, if you're going to make it in this industry, you may not be a Beatle. There's all these other ways that you potentially need to make money, and it's like, okay, I'm going to do things in different ways to take advantage of my skills. It seemed like you were really adept at that.
Yeah, the demo doctor worked out really good. I had a synthesizer that was a sequencer programmer, and I had 750 instruments that are on floppy disks. So I played the drums, bass, horns, strings, thunder, lightning, babies crying, any kind of thing that you can think of was on this keyboard. And I advertised in the Music Connection magazine, and all these aspiring singer-songwriters would come over to my living room, pay me $100, and they would show me how their song goes, and I would program it and make it sound like a master. And I did that for a dozen years, and of course, when Harry came over with Ringo, that was amazing. And then he went over to a recording session with Linda Ronstadt and Jimmy Webb. Linda Ronstadt was producing a Jimmy Webb album. So he grabs Jimmy Webb out of the studio and brings him back to my living room. And Jimmy Webb wrote a song called "What Does a Woman See in a Man?" And Harry loved the song. So he forced Jimmy to come to my living room and play it on my plastic synthesizer. And of course, Jimmy didn't want to do it because he's a grand piano guy with real keys, you know. So we really convinced him, and he played the track, and then we took Jimmy back to the Linda Ronstadt session, and then Harry and I finished the song in my living room. And then Eric Carmen, he saw an ad in the Music Connection, and I used Ringo's picture, with a picture of me and Ringo. And so Eric Carmen, I said, "You're Eric Carmen?" "Yeah." So he came over and he recorded 12 songs that he wrote pre-Raspberries, before he started the band The Raspberries. So, it's just really great stories of all these great people that come over to my living room.
And anybody you did a demo with that was unknown at the time that they went on to, have success?
No, not really. They're all really, really, some of the demos really came out really good. Robin Greenspan and Lacey Harmon did a wonderful album, Gardener of Eden. That was my favorite, one of my favorite albums that was recorded there. And there was really a lot of really great musicians that came in and recorded. But that lasted for about 12 years until everybody was able to go to the Guitar Center and buy their own little setup. And that put me out of business.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to open it up to the audience. But I'm just curious, given your long experience, if you were talking to somebody, a young person who said, "I really want to be in the music industry," like what would you tell them to think about?
I would tell them to stick to their guns. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. Do what you want to do, because that is your personality, and that's, you can take criticism, the saying that, you're singing flat or your drummer's out of rhythm and stuff like that. But as a singer, songwriter, artist, do what you feel, what you want to do. And back in the day, it was really easy to keep track of royalties because you had a vinyl record or a cassette or a 8-track or something. But today, it's a whole completely different world. It's all download, and it's all internet. And I still can't figure out how people get paid, because my original music is online. And, I get, like this one song I wrote that we're going to play tonight called Late Bloomer. It's got like 31,000 views, and I got a royalty of 5 cents. Come on, so to me, I'm really scared about the royalty thing. I don't know how you're trusting some kid behind a computer tabulating how many plays your song has. There's no solid album that you can hand them. It's all online. So, but still, Taylor Swift, 10 top 10s, unbelievable, really.
All right, should we open it up to the audience?
Sure, let's open up the audience. Yeah.
Okay, question here. My name's Al with Citizens Journalists United, and you cover patch. Okay, back to 1970, ABC TV had I believe it was a movie of the week, but Harry Nielsen was on that thing. It was called Me and My Arrow.
Yes.
Did you do any work with him on that?
Actually, it's really a great story about me and my arrow. We were stoned in my living room, and there's a radio station in Los Angeles called Arrow 95 FM. So Harry said to me, "Well, let's give him a gift. We'll give him a little 30-second spot." So I took the record, Me and My Arrow, and I put it on my cassette, and then I programmed an ending to it. So it went, "Me and My Arrow, 93 FM," So we recorded that. It came out great. And, we delivered it to the radio station. And they went completely berserk. The guys sent us a letter saying, "Oh, my God, thank you so much." So that was Me and My Arrow. And what's really terrific about Me and My Arrow is that Dean Torrance from Jan and Dean, he's the guy who did the his sister did the needlepoint on the album The Point by Harry Nilsson. And so, Dean Torrance did all the graphics for tons and tons of famous album covers. Randy Newman and Eagles and all kinds of great stuff. But just hanging out with Harry was golden, totally golden.
Now that I think about it, I think she brought it up. I think the movie was actually called The Point. And then
Right. That was from the movie The Point. Yes. And it's a really good story about that. Harry did the narration on one version, and then Dustin Hoffman did the narration on another version. And then Harry asked Ringo, "Hey, would you mind doing the narration for The Point?" And Ringo says, "How much?" And Harry says, "I'll pay you the same amount of money I paid Dustin Hoffman." And Ringo said, "Okay." So he did the thing, and Harry paid him $500. And that was the same amount of money he paid Dustin Hoffman to do the narration on The Point. Really cool stuff.
All right. Anybody else?
Robin and Lacey, there they are. My favorite. They are so beautiful.
Question?
Very talented. I probably have other friends here I can't see.
Question for you.
Who's got a question?
Question for you.
You do?
Yes. Do you have any stories about hanging out with Billy Bob Thornton?
Oh.
You guys, and did you get stoned together? Second part.
Yeah. I was on a plane to Belgium doing a concert tour with the Turtles, and the Monkees and the Trogs and the Turtles and Foghat or some other bands were on. Spencer Davis and a couple other bands. So and Procol Harum, they were all on the bill. So I'm on the airplane with the Monkees and the Turtles, and we're flying to Belgium. And I'm sitting next to Howard, and I said, "Hey, why don't we do an album of 10 of your favorite songs that you always wanted to record?" And he says, "Okay," because he knew I was the demo doctor, and he knew I was making demos. So we recorded these 10 songs in my living room. And then a guy named David Spiro, he was the guy who ran the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in wherever the city. Cleveland. And so Harry wanted to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So he, I'll answer your question in a second. We took a picture in my driveway of Harry in a blue bathrobe with a shovel, like the groundbreaking of the Rock and Roll Museum, and we sent it to David Spiro to try to get Harry in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Never happened. But Howard Kalin played our demo in my living room of his 10 favorite songs for David Spiro, who played it for Billy Bob Thornton. And so Billy Bob says, "Hey, tell him to come to my studio. We'll finish the album in my studio." So Howard and I go to Billy Bob's studio. Now, this is the best. I love this story. The house where Billy Bob Thornton lived, it was on Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills, originally belonged to Cecil B. DeMille. All right? So during Prohibition, Cecil B. DeMille built a tunnel under Roxbury to La Cienega Boulevard to a phony storefront. And all the celebrities would take their limos to the phony storefront, take the tunnel to Cecil B. DeMille's basement, and they'd have their parties. And then Cecil B. Sold the house to Roger Corman, and then Roger Corman sold it to Dudley Moore, and then Dudley Moore sold it to Roman Polanski, and then Roman Polanski sold it to Slash. And then Slash built a studio in that basement. And then Billy Bob Thornton bought it from Slash. So this is the room that we recorded the songs on Howard's album. And, I sat in the same room that Angelina Jolie sat in, if you know what I mean. And then we did the album, and there was a really fantastic song called Music. And it's like an 8-minute song. And in the middle of the song, Billy Bob Thornton does a narration. And it was, he was the coolest in the world. Has anybody seen Sling Blade, the movie that Billy Bob Thornton wrote? So he wrote that with his son sitting on his knee with a legal pad, and he wrote the movie, And just hanging out with Billy Bob, and there was Hank Williams Jr.'s daughter, Holly Williams. We were all sitting in the studio 4 o'clock in the morning, and Billy Bob had his Ripple wine. And I was smoking a joint, and she was smoking a joint. And we're sitting there, and I'm going, would you do Carl for me? Carl is the character in Sling Blade. So he looks at me kind of funny. And he's in a studio chair with the wheels and stuff. So he spins around, and his shoulders go up, and he makes his face like Carl. And he turns around and goes, I'm here with a turtle. And I scared the shit out of me. It was unbelievable, really, really great stories. So Billy Bob Thornton is still an amazing guy, really terrific. He never sleeps. He's always working. He's always doing stuff. Really cool stuff.
All right, one more question from the audience. I thought I saw a hand in the back there.
Hi.
One more. Yeah, amazing memory.
Like I said, I saved every single archive in my house. So, all the calendars with all the people's names and all the postcards and letters and stickers and contracts, and I saved it all. And it made it really easy for me to remember stuff. When you're looking at a picture and you see, stuff, and you go, oh my God, and it's really amazing how many people I've encountered, celebrities. Like one time in 1968, I was working for Pulsar Records, a record company in Hollywood, and I was the gopher, photographs and get the coffee and drive the musicians to the studio. So Graham Bond was on the label. He was the guy who had the Graham Bond organization with Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce before Eric joined and made the Cream. So he calls me up. He says, we got a jam session at a studio. Get your harpsichord and pick me up, and let's go have some fun. So I pick him up, and we go to a studio in Hollywood called TTG, and Mitch Mitchell was setting up the drums, and Lowell George was playing flute, and Jack Cassidy from the Airplane was on the bass, and Graham Bond was on the Hammond B3, and I was setting up my harpsichord, went through a Hammond Leslie speaker. It was really psychedelic, and it had these foot pedals that made it sound, weird. So anyway, I'm sitting there putting the leg on my harpsichord, and I feel something behind me, and I look around behind me, and in walks Jimi Hendrix with two blonde chicks, one carrying his amp and one carrying his guitar. And he walks in, and he sits right next to me. And he plugs his guitar in, and I'm looking, I'm 20 years old, and there's Jimi Hendrix sitting right next to me. So we do the blues in A for about 2 hours. And then at the end of the session, he stands up in the corner of the room, and he starts lighting up a joint, and he goes like this. So I get up, and I go over and join him, and we're sharing the joint, and then this roadie guy, and so the three of us are in the corner of the room smoking a joint. So Jimmy goes, he's doing guitar solo with his mouth. And he hands me the joint. I take a hit, and then I start going, ka-dum-dum-chak, ka-dum-ka-dum-chak, ka-dum-dum. I was the drummer. And then I hand the joint to the roadie guy, and he was the bass player. So the three of us are doing a power trio with our mouths, smoking a joint in the corner of the room. I mean, I wish I had a camera. That was all these stories are in the book. It's really great stuff.
All right. Any more? One more question. All right, last one.
Hey, how you doing, Andy?
Hi.
Eric of Louie Nuts.
Hi.
Yeah. So, what was the craziest ever recording session you've ever done? Any novelty songs or things that were totally off the wall that were never released?
Oh, well, that whole Jimi Hendrix recording session was never released. Some people online sent me tapes, but it wasn't the actual recording. But the most craziest recording session, yikes. That was probably the most insane one with Jimi Hendrix. But there was a really good one with Gary Malaber, Steve Miller's drummer, and Steve Cropper, the guitar player, and again, Jack Cassidy, the drummer, bass player for the Jefferson Airplane. So we were doing an album for this guy named Al Stahaley, and it's just great sitting in the room with Steve Cropper, and in between takes, I said, "Could you show me some cool licks?" So he does this thing, doing that, doing that, doing that, doing that, doing that. And I said, "Oh, really?" Doing that, doing that, doing that. So he showed me some really cool licks and stuff. But just working with Steve Cropper, all these great musicians, it was wonderful.
Amazing. So I'm curious, like, just when you look back now, having gone through this process, like, what most amazes you about the last 50 years of making life as a musician?
What was most amazing?
Yeah, when you reflect on it.
Well, I would say the Ringo Starr and Harry and Little Richard and Chuck Berry, those were the definite tops. And almost getting run over by Chuppy Checker was pretty cool. But, when I toured with Dr. John the Night Tripper in 1968, we drove in 2 VW buses from L.A. to New York. And we played a place called Steve Paul's The Scene, which Hendrix and all these big celebrities played at. And so we played the gig, and backstage was Ginger Baker and Eric Clapton. They were just sitting backstage doing drugs. And so John Bonham gets on the drums, and Booker T gets on the Hammond B3. So Dr. John's playing the guitar, and I'm on the harpsichord. And here I am, 20 years old, playing with John Bonham and Booker T. This is the kind of stuff that never happens to anybody. These are all my little 15 minutes of fame.
All right, so tell us what you're gonna play tonight. What are you playing tonight?
Okay, well, about in January, I met this band. They're from Mississauga. I think that's how to pronounce it. It's a city outside of Toronto, and they're called the Dreamboats. And I swear, I've never seen a better band in my life. They put on a show that is like, there are really good musicians out there that can sing and play and do their stuff. But the Dreamboats entertain. They as you will see when they come up here, they're sweethearts. They're wonderful, great personalities. They're extremely talented. All of them. These 3 guys, they all play drums, they all play guitar, they all play bass, they all sing, they all write. They're just really extremely talented, and I'm honored to have them here. They're really just a wonderful band. So they're going to join me, and we're going to do some music for you.
Andy, thank you so much.
You're
Ladies
welcome.
and gentlemen, Andy
You're welcome.
Cahan. So we're going to take a short break. We'll make the transition, and then you'll come back and perform.
Okay, that sounds great.